The night Tyler left me crying in the freezing Boston rain was the night everything I thought I knew about my life began to unravel. It had started like any other long shift at Boston Children's Hospital. 12 hours, 3 emergency cases, and 1 nearly lost child I had to bring back twice on the table. Little Jonah Benson, age 9, had gone into cardiac arrest during his emergency appendectomy. I'd held his hand while the machines breathed for him, whispering encouragement as if my words alone could pull him back. By the time I stepped out into the parking lot, the sky had cracked open, spitting sleet and rain like glass shards. The cold pierced through my scrubs, soaking me in seconds. My fingers trembled not just from the weather, but from adrenaline still coursing through me.
Idée savait de life.
Again. And all I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and forget, for just one night, the weight I carried. But Tyler was already waiting at the curb, engine idling, arms folded as he leaned against his dented Subaru. "You're 45 minutes late," he said the moment I approached. "I had an emergency case."
The kid.
"I don't care about your kids, Evie," he snapped. "You say that like it justifies you blowing off your real life." "My real life?" I asked, incredulous, water dripping from my hair, pooling at my feet. "What do you think this is, Tyler? Saving lives isn't some hobby." "It doesn't pay the bills," he said coldly. "It sure as hell doesn't help us start a family." And there it was again. The same fight. Recycled words. Same wounds reopened.
Tyler wanted kids, now.
I didn't. Not yet.
Meb no te ver.
The idea of bringing children into a world this broken, when I hadn't even figured out how to fix myself, felt cruel. "You knew this when we got married," I said. "I told you." "That was 3 years ago, Evie. People grow up. People change, Tyler."
"I'm not ready."
"No," he sneered, stepping closer.
"You're not willing."
"Not to grow. Not to give. You're stuck in some self-righteous nurse fantasy."
"You want to save everyone except the man who is right here, asking for a life with you."
He grabbed my arm, not hard, but firm enough to make me flinch. I saw the line in his eyes.
Not juste frustration.
Resentment. Contempt. "Maybe," he said, voice low and cold, "standing in the cold will make you appreciate what you've got at home." And then he was gone.
Just like that.
He slid into his car, peeled away, and left me there, 20 yards from a hospital, soaked to the bone, phone battery dead, and nowhere to go but back inside to the same fluorescent lights and beeping monitors I'd just escaped. I stood frozen, the wind slicing through me, wondering how long I had been lying to myself. How many years I'd convinced myself that Tyler was a good man going through a rough patch. That the bitterness, the gambling, the passive-aggressive digs were just symptoms of stress. That his growing distance didn't mean he didn't love me, just that he didn't know how to show it anymore. But standing there, shivering with my scrubs clinging to my skin like second flesh, I knew something had shifted. I needed to get home. To safety. To warmth. I fumbled for my phone.
Black screen.
No signal. No battery. Of course. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty now, the night shift settled in, the day shift gone. The world felt hollow, the rain amplifying the silence with every drop. That's when I saw it. A black Cadillac Escalade idling near the garage exit, its hazard lights blinking in a slow, steady rhythm. I could see a silhouette in the front seat. Big. Still. Focused. My ride? Maybe. The timing felt right. I'd ordered an Uber earlier, maybe it had finally arrived, and by some miracle hadn't cancelled. I ran toward the vehicle, heels clicking, my nurse's bag slapping against my thigh. The rear passenger door clicked open at my touch, and I slid in without a second thought. "Sorry I'm late," I muttered, brushing rain from my face. "My phone died." "Where the hell did you come from?" The voice wasn't that of a driver. It was deep. Measured. Foreign, but not unfamiliar. Italian? Maybe. The kind of voice that belonged in private clubs and behind expensive courtroom doors. A voice that didn't ask questions, it issued commands. I froze. The man in the front passenger seat, not the driver, I realized too late, turned slightly, and even in the dim glow from the dashboard, I saw the blood. He was clutching his side, white dress shirt soaked in a spreading crimson stain. His face was carved from stone, angular, cold, beautiful in a terrifying way.
Hair slicked back. Eyes pale grey blue, sharp as winter frost.
I just climbed into a stranger's car. Worse, a stranger who was bleeding. I thought this was my Uber, I stammered, reaching for the handle. I'll just... Don't. That one word stopped me cold. His tone wasn't loud. But it was final. Drive, he said. The driver, a younger man with dark hair and dead eyes, nodded silently and pulled away from the curb. My heart thundered in my chest. What the hell had I just walked into? Please, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I really think there's been a mistake. Who left you out there? The man asked. What? You're soaked. Hospital scrubs. No coat. Your hands are shaking. You look like a woman who's just been thrown away. So I'll ask again, who left you out there? I hesitated. My husband, I admitted. He was angry. What kind of man leaves his wife in a storm? The kind who thinks she's broken, I whispered. Because she won't give him what he wants. And what does he want? A family. Kids.
Un futur amenot très fort.
He looked at me for a long time. Not like he was judging. Like he understood. Some lessons, he said finally, are more dangerous than others. Then he said my name.
Evelyn.
I froze.
How do you know my name?
The corners of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile.
Something darké.
Because your husband, he said, has debts. And I make it my business to know everyone involved. My blood turned to ice. What is this? I asked. Who are you? Dominic Romano, he said smoothly. And whether you realize it or not, Evelyn, you just stepped into my world. And suddenly, I knew. My life had just changed forever. The car cut through the rain-slicked streets of Boston like a blade, moving with quiet confidence as if it belonged to the night itself. I sat rigid in the back seat, drenched and trembling, my eyes darting between the tinted windows and the wounded man beside me.
Dominique Romano.
The name meant nothing to me in that moment, but something in the way he said it, calm, controlled, like the world bent around him, told me I was sitting next to someone very dangerous. I clutched my nurse's bag against my chest like it could shield me from what I had stepped into. My mind raced for an exit, for some kind of escape plan. But every logical route was gone. I was already inside the car. Already moving. And the man who had spoken my name without introduction was bleeding through $1,000 shirt like he didn't even feel it.
You're hurt, he said, my nurse instinct overriding my fear.
No hospitals, he replied flatly.
You'll bleed out.
I won't. You need stitches, antibiotics, fluids. I said no hospitals. His tone silenced me, but not my conscience. I had seen men die because they refused help. I wasn't about to let this one bleed out in front of me, even if he scared the hell out of me. Why me? I asked finally. Why did you let me into the car? He turned his head, eyes fixed on mine with the same intensity I'd seen in trauma patients who knew they might not survive. You're a nurse, he said.
The right kind.
I frowned. What does that mean? Not all of them would sit with a dying child for 4 hours. I saw the way you came out of that hospital tonight. That wasn't fatigue. That was heartbreak.
You care too much. You were watching me. I've been watching your husband.
My stomach dropped. He continued, voice low and deliberate. Tyler Carter has spent the last year accumulating debts he can't pay. Not just to casinos and bookies. But to people like me. And people worse than me. I swallowed hard. That doesn't explain why you know about me. Because your name is on some of those loans, Evelyn. Co-signed. Shared accounts. He used you as collateral long before he left you in the rain.
No, he whispered.
That's not possible. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince me. He simply reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a thin folder. He dropped it onto the seat between us. I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up with trembling fingers. Inside were printouts.
Banque record. Loan document.
Transaction histories I'd never seen. The signatures were all mine, or forgeries close enough to pass. I saw my name linked to offshore transfers, cash withdrawals, wire requests from accounts I hadn't touched in years. And then the worst page of all, a list of hospital patients' children, from Boston Children's, with surgery dates, room numbers, and attending physicians. All exported under a hospital login. My login. No, I said again, this time louder, angrier. This isn't possible. I never. He did it, Dominic said quietly. Tyler used your credentials to pull information. Sold it to the Russians. Names, dates, vulnerabilities. Why would anyone want? Because my godson is on that list. I looked up. 3 weeks ago, Dominic continued, he was scheduled for a cardiac procedure. Someone tried to intercept the medical transport. It wasn't random. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. My throat tightened.
And you think Tyler?
I don't think, he cut in. I know. He's a small man playing in a world full of monsters. He thought if he gave them what they wanted, they'd erase his debt. But men like Petrov don't forgive. They use. They trap. And eventually they kill. I stared down at the folder again. At the evidence of my husband's betrayal, of children, of me, of everything I had spent my life protecting. I didn't know, I whispered. I swear to God I didn't know. Dominic leaned back against the seat, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wound. I believe you, he said, because a woman like you doesn't fake that kind of grief. But intent doesn't matter in this game.
Association is everything.
And right now, you're in the crosshairs.
I presta hand to my mouth, bill rising in my throat.
So what happens now?
We keep you alive.
That's your plan. He turned to me again, eyes sharp as razors. No. That's the bare minimum. My plan is to figure out what else Tyler gave them. And what they want next.
I shook my head. I can't go home.
You won't. The car slowed as we entered a private road lined with trees and security cameras. At the end stood a mansion so large and cold it looked more like a fortress than a home. Iron gates opened without a sound. We rolled through. My chest tightened.
This is your house.
One of them. The driver stopped in front of the entrance. Before I could open the door, Dominic was already moving, slower than before, his hand pressed to his side. He gestured to the front door.
You'll stay here tonight.
I can't.
You're not safe anywhere else, Evelyn.
Trust me on that. I hesitated. I don't trust you, I said honestly. He gave the smallest nod of respect. Good. That's the first smart thing you've said all night. A woman appeared at the front entrance, a sharp-eyed older woman in a navy blue suit. She didn't flinch at the sight of Dominic's blood-soaked shirt. Rosa, he said. Please prepare the guest suite. Ms. Carter will be staying with us. I stood on the stone steps, rain still dripping from my hair, scrubs still clinging to my frame.
Everything inside me screamed to run.
But the truth was, I had nowhere left to go. Dominic turned to me once more. I'll have someone bring your things from the car, he said. Shower. Eat. Rest. You've got some decisions to make tomorrow. I stared at him, torn between fear and something else I couldn't name.
Something dangereux. Something magnetic.
What decisions? He smiled, cold, knowing. The kind that don't come with do-overs. Then he disappeared inside, leaving me on the threshold of a life I hadn't chosen, yet somehow couldn't walk away from. Morning came slowly, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest suite like a reluctant truth. I hadn't slept much. Even after the long hot shower, the soft sheets, and the silence that replaced the storm outside, my mind had kept racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's signature next to mine on fraudulent documents. I heard Dominic's voice naming the unthinkable, that the man I married had used my credentials to sell information about vulnerable children. That he'd made me an accomplice in something monstrous. And now I was here, in a mansion owned by a man who could kill with a look, nursing wounds both physical and unseen, telling me I wasn't safe outside his walls. I didn't trust Dominic Romano. But the truth was, I didn't trust anyone anymore.
He found Rosa in the kitchen when he came downstairs.
She was already preparing breakfast, calm and efficient, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. She greeted me without surprise. Coffee. God, yes. She poured it into a porcelain mug and handed it over. I took a sip, letting the warmth settle into my chest like a small act of mercy. Dominic's in his study, she said, as if that was the next logical step in my day. He asked to see you. Of course he did. I found him behind a massive oak desk, the kind you only see in law offices and old money homes. He was no longer in the bloodied shirt but a tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar. The only hint of the previous night's chaos was the stiffness in his posture and a bandage peeking out from under his sleeve. He didn't rise when I entered, but his eyes met mine with sharp interest, like he'd been waiting to see what kind of woman would walk through the door this morning. I didn't sit. You said I have decisions to make, I began.
Let's start there.
He leaned back slightly, fingers steepled beneath his chin.
I don't play game, Evelyn.
I don't deal in half-truths. So here it is. Your husband, soon-to-be ex, I assume, owes money to people who don't believe in second chances. The Russians want you because they think you know something. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Either way, you're a liability to them now. And to you? I asked. That depends on what you decide next. He rose slowly, walked to a bar cart in the corner, poured himself a glass of water. I can make the Russians go away, he continued. Wipe Tyler's debts. Bury this entire thing under so much silence the world forgets your name. But favors like that come at a cost. I folded my arms. Let me guess.
I repay you by staying here. Playing house.
His expression didn't change.
You think too small. I don't need a pay. I need a partner.
I blinked.
A partner. In public, you débit Mrs. Romano.
A nurse turned philanthropist. The face of our new foundation to fund pediatric care. In private, you'd help me clean up Tyler's mess, identify leaks in the hospital system, and make sure no one else can ever use your credentials against you. I stared at him.
You want me to pretend to be your wife. I'm not asking for pretense.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you seriously proposing marriage? He took a sip of water, as calm as if he were reading the morning paper. I'm offering you protection, legitimacy, power. You'll never have to run again. And neither will the children whose lives are hanging in the balance because of your husband's greed.
He sat down, suddenly tired.
You really think I'd say yes to that? He walked over, standing across the desk from me. I think you're a woman who understands that in this world, safety is not given. It's earned. And sometimes it's taken. I swallowed. And if I say no? Then I'll put you on a private plane, send you anywhere you want with a new name and enough money to disappear. But you'll always be looking over your shoulder. And the moment the Russians find you, you'll wish you'd chosen differently. It was blunt, ruthless, honest. I hated that it made sense. But something inside me still recoiled. This isn't love, I said. No, he agreed. Love is a liability. What I'm offering is an alliance.
He stood, walking to the window, watching the grey sky hang over the trees like a curtain.
My life had collapsed in less than 24 hours. My husband was a traitor. My name was tied to crimes I hadn't committed. And now a mafia boss was offering to make me powerful, if I surrendered everything I once believed about right and wrong. How many women have you made this offer to? I asked without turning. None, he said. And if it means anything, I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you could handle it. I turned back to face him. I need time. You have 24 hours. After that, the Russians make their next move. He walked past me toward the door, pausing only once. Think about this, Evelyn. Not with fear. Not with anger. Think about the children on that list. The ones whose names were sold. Ask yourself who's going to protect them if you don't. He left me alone in the study, the silence deafening. I stayed there for hours, reading every document he'd given me. I confirmed the forgeries. Recognized Tyler's digital signature.
Saw the evidence pile up like brick forming a cell around my life.
At some point, Rosa brought me food. I didn't eat. By the time night fell, I was numb. That's when the video arrived.
Rosa handed me a phone without a word.
On the screen, Tyler, tied to a chair, bruised, bleeding, eyes wild. A man off camera spoke with a thick Russian accent. You want him back, nurse? We make trade. You for him. Otherwise, he die slow. The video ended. I stared at the phone. Rosa watched me. He's not worth it. I said nothing. Because I wasn't thinking about Tyler. I was thinking about the kid Dominic said was almost taken. The kids whose names were on that list. The damage already done. The lives still at risk. I didn't sleep that night. But by dawn, I had made my decision.
Not for Dominique. Not for Tyler.
For me. And for the children I'd sworn, once in a time before betrayal, to protect at all costs. I didn't knock. I walked straight into Dominic's study as the morning light spilled across the marble floors. He looked up from his desk, unsurprised. If anything, he had been waiting for me. I'll do it, I said. He leaned back slightly, setting down a folder.
You'll marry me.
I'll take the offer, I corrected. But not because I want your ring or your empire.
You want control.
I want the children off that list protected.
And you want Tyler to face conséquence.
You'll have all three. I studied him.
I'm not sure.
This isn't love.
This is survival.
I need to know you understand that. He stood, walking toward me with a slow, calculated calm.
You're not a possession, Evelyn. You're a choice.
Mine.
And now, I'm yours.
I didn't flinch when he reached into his pocket and produced a ring box. It was simple.
Elegant.
No grand gesture. No kneeling. I won't pretend this is a fairy tale, he said. But I protect what I commit to. And I destroy what threatens it. I took the box, closed it without looking, and slid it into my coat pocket. Then let's finish this, I said.
You want Tyler gone.
Dominic nodded once. Then we do it your way.
The plan was simple.
Brutal in its efficiency. Tyler was being held at an abandoned psychiatric facility outside the city, neutral ground, where the Russians wouldn't expect a clean fight. Petrov had taken him not just as a hostage, but as bait. He knew Dominic would want leverage. He knew I would come. Dominic didn't try to stop me. He gave me full access, floor plans, personnel rosters, exit routes. More than that, he gave me respect. Space to plan.
Authority to exécuter.
It was the first time in years I'd felt like I was standing on equal ground with someone. And I wasn't going to waste it. I insisted on going alone. At first, his men resisted. Rosa too. But Dominic silenced them all. She's not a civilian anymore, he said.
Letter d'Odis.
The abandoned hospital was a decaying shell of grey walls and shattered windows. It smelled of mildew, rust, and ghosts. The perfect place to erase something, someone, quietly. I wore a nurse's uniform, one of my old ones, the name tag replaced. My hair was tied back, face plain. I looked like any overworked, underpaid healthcare worker on a mission. Just another piece of the background. Inside, two of Dominic's men posed as EMTs. They created a fake emergency, a diversion for the outside guards. It bought me 10 minutes alone in the basement ward where Tyler was held. When I entered the room, he didn't recognize me at first. He was slumped in a metal chair, wrists tied, face bruised, one eye swollen shut. He looked like a shell of the man I'd once loved, and yet, too familiar. Evelyn, he croaked, voice raw. You came.
He said nothing.
Just walked in, closed the door, and locked it behind me. They told me you'd come, he said. I didn't believe them. I thought, you'd left. For good.
He approached slowly, at steady.
You sold children's names, Tyler, I said. His eyes widened.
No.
No, I didn't know. Look, I was desperate, okay? I thought it was just billing data. Stuff no one would miss. You used my login. They said it was just hospital records. I didn't think.
You never think.
That's the problem. I can fix it, he pleaded. I can explain. They'll let me go if I give them something else. You maybe. He stopped when he saw what I was holding. A syringe. Already loaded. His breath caught. What is that? Potassium chloride, I said. Fast acting.
Painless.
Cardiac arrest within seconds. And untraceable if done right. He jerked against the ropes.
You can't do this.
I can. I've saved people with less time than you have left. Please, he begged. Evie, I was stupid. I was scared. But I didn't want to hurt anyone. You did. You hurt me.
You hurt those kids.
And you didn't stop. Tears welled in his eyes.
You still have a choice.
I made it. I stepped forward, pushed the needle into his neck with clinical precision, and depressed the plunger. His body seized once, then went still. He was gone before his lips could form another excuse.
He stood there for a moment, breathing in the silence.
I hadn't cried. I hadn't screamed. I had simply ended something that should have never begun. When I emerged, Dominic's men took care of the rest.
A forged des certificat. A report blaming a hat attack.
By the time the police found the body, the trail would be cold. I returned to the estate without fanfare. Dominic was waiting for me in the sitting room, standing by the fire like some brooding specter from an older world. It's done, I said. He nodded once, solemn. I crossed the room, took the ring from my pocket, and handed it to him. Put it on me, I said. His eyes narrowed slightly. Are you sure?
No, he whispered.
But I'll never be sure of anything again. So this will have to do. He took the ring, slid it onto my finger with surprising tenderness. No vows. No witnesses.
Just the two of us in the flickering light of something dangerous and permanent.
You're mine now, he said. I looked up at him.
Not because you own me. Because he chose it.
His hand brushed against mine. And I'll never forget that. That night, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The rain had returned, softer this time. A steady drizzle that whispered against the glass. Somewhere out there, my old life had ended. But inside these walls, a new one had begun. Not better. Not worse. Just mine. I didn't know what kind of woman I was becoming. But I knew this much. I was no longer a victim. And no one, no man, no past, no enemy, would ever make me feel powerless again. 6 months later, Boston belonged to Dominic Romano. The newspapers called it a wave of quiet reform. Police crackdowns on the Russian networks. Politicians suddenly retiring.
Charity blooming overnight.
But beneath the polite language was a truth no one dared to write. Dominic hadn't just defeated his enemies, he'd absorbed them. And standing beside him at every public event, ribbon cutting, and charity gala was me, Evelyn Romano. I still wasn't used to the name. Sometimes, when I signed papers for the Romano Foundation for Children, I had to pause halfway through the signature, remembering what it used to be. Evelyn Carter was gone, but traces of her still lived in the way I ran the hospitals, the way I touched the hands of children recovering from surgery, the way I couldn't stop thinking about the ones we hadn't saved. On the surface, I looked like a woman who had everything: wealth, security, power. But under the polished exterior, I knew the cost. Every comfort in the mansion was bought with blood, loyalty, and silence. Dominic and I had been married in a private ceremony 3 months after Tyler's death. No guests. No priest.
Juste signature on a document and a promise spoken in low voices by the fire.
It wasn't romantic, but it was real. He had given me what I'd asked for: control, equality, partnership. And in return, I had given him what he needed most: legitimacy. A woman whose compassion could make even his enemies hesitate.
The queen busied the king.
At first, I had wondered if I had simply traded one prison for another. But the difference was clear now. With Dominic, I wasn't trapped, I was necessary. And that changed everything. The morning light flooded the bedroom through tall windows overlooking the city. Dominic was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, shirtless, scrolling through reports on his tablet. The scars across his ribs were fading, but I could still trace the bullet wound I'd stitched that first night. Up already? I murmured. Always. His voice was rough, softened only by exhaustion. There's movement in New York. The Petrov remnants are trying to regroup under a new name. I pulled the silk sheet tighter around myself.
You'll handle it.
He glanced over his shoulder. We'll handle it. The words sent a small, unexpected warmth through me. I got up, crossed to the window, and looked down at the city below, the city we now ruled, whether the world wanted to admit it or not. Boston had become cleaner, safer. The hospitals under our foundation had new equipment, better funding, and staff who no longer had to beg for resources. Children who once waited months for surgeries were being treated in days. And every success story was another layer of armor around my conscience. I had done terrible things to get here. But I had done them for something that mattered.
Rosa knocked softly on the door before entering.
Mrs. Romano, she said. The board meeting starts in an hour. I've prepared the documents for your presentation. Thank you, Rosa. As she turned to leave, Dominic spoke. Has Marcus confirmed the security for tonight? Yes, sir. The entire perimeter will be covered. Good, he said.
No surprise this time.
When the door closed, I looked at him.
Still waiting for ghosts.
Ghosts have long memories, he said, meeting my gaze. And we've made a lot of them. Later that day, the foundation meeting took place in one of the downtown hospitals we had rebuilt. I stood before a group of doctors, investors, and local officials, talking about child healthcare like it was the only language I'd ever known. My voice didn't shake. My arguments were precise, persuasive. No one in that room would ever suspect that the woman convincing them to donate millions to pediatric care had once killed her husband with her own hands. That was the paradox of Evelyn Romano. I was both healer and executioner. And the world applauded me for both, without realizing it. After the meeting, I drove alone to the construction site of a new clinic. The cold Boston wind bit through my coat, but I didn't care. I liked coming here, the smell of raw concrete, the sound of hammers, the chaos that promised creation. Dominic called as I stood near the foundation wall, watching workers pour cement. They're gone, he said. The last of Petrov's men surrendered. No more threats. And Tyler's debts? Erased, he said simply. Every name connected to him wiped from record. You're clean.
I closed my eyes, letting the relief settle somewhere deep in my bones.
For the first time in what felt like years, the shadow over me had lifted. That night, I found Dominic in his study again, staring into the fire like he always did when he'd won another quiet war. It's over, I said softly. For now. He looked up as I approached. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen before, uncertainty. What happens now, Dominic? I asked. Now that there's no one left to fight? He rose from his chair, walked toward me slowly, and took my hands. Now, he said, we build. We spent that night together without words. Just silence, warmth, and the kind of understanding that doesn't need to be spoken. Weeks passed. The city stabilized. Donations poured in. Our faces appeared in magazines, him, the reformed businessman, me, the humanitarian wife.
The illusion was perfect.
Until the morning I found the pregnancy test on the bathroom counter.
2 pink lines.
I stared at them for a long time, hands trembling. I had never planned for this. Not with Tyler, not with anyone. The idea of motherhood had always filled me with dread. But now, staring at the proof of life growing inside me, I didn't feel fear. I felt something heavier. Responsibility. When Dominic came in and saw the test, he froze.
For a moment, the ever-controlled manic knew vanished.
His expression cracked open, raw emotion flooding through. Evelyn, he said quietly, stepping closer. Is it? Yes, I whispered. I'm pregnant.
Et exhaled slowly, the sound halfway between a sigh and a log.
Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me tighter than he ever had before. For the first time since the night I'd stepped into his car, I felt safe.
Not protected, safe.
There was a difference. I didn't think I'd ever have this, he murmured. A family. Something that wasn't born from violence. Maybe this is how it ends, I said. Not with blood. With new beginnings. He smiled faintly, resting his forehead against mine. No, he said. This is how it continues. Months later, I stood on the balcony of our new estate outside the city, watching the sunrise. Behind me, the sound of a baby's soft cries filled the room. Dominic was already awake, pacing with our son in his arms, his voice low and steady as he hummed in Italian. I turned toward them, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Maybe I had become something darker than I'd ever imagined. Maybe my hands would never be entirely clean. But as I looked at my child, the one life I had created instead of saved, I realized I didn't need forgiveness. I had built something lasting out of the ruins. Dominic joined me at the window, our son nestled between us. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked quietly.
The Rhin.
"The hospital. The car." "All the time," I said.
Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?
I met his eyes. If it hadn't, I'd still be living someone else's life. He smiled, brushing a lock of hair from my face. "You were never meant to be saved, Evelyn. You were meant to rise." Outside, rain began to fall again, soft, steady, forgiving. And for the first time, I didn't see it as a reminder of pain. I saw it as renewal. The storm that had once destroyed me had also made me. I was no longer the woman left crying in the rain. I was the woman who had learned to walk through it and never look back.